We should get Janet back into the mansion. Catherine, could you start examining Janet?
I'm on it.
Mind explaining what exactly happened out there?
We found Janet tied up in the lighthouse. Someone attacked her.
Monsieur! Oh my.
No need to worry. Janet's gonna be fine after a good night's rest.
Thank you. Janet's attacker is probably the same person who stole all the files on Project Genetica. The one who murdered Freddie and Portia. Whoever it is, they're still here among us. We gathered all of you here to get to the bottom of this once and for all. No one will leave this place until the culprit is identified.
Damn straight. Now why don't we get started?
Right. As you all know, I've been looking into all the incidents and murders that took place during our stay here. From the clues I've gathered, I believe I'm very close to uncovering the culprit's identity. I'm certain that once I've gone through all the evidence one more time, we'll be able to determine the culprit.
Let's begin with Lucas's death then.
Sure. At first, we thought Lucas slipped and fell by accident. But that wasn't the case. From the state of his body, it seemed that he had been in a fight before he died.
If I remember correctly, we found out his knuckles were freshly bruised.
That's right. We also noticed Lucas's suit was ripped. By that point, I was already suspecting Freddie was involved somehow. I found one of Freddie's pins by the pool. Besides, he had a bad limp around that time too. But there was no real proof, since the pool patio's security footage of the incident was missing.
Except that in one of the remaining frames, I noticed Lucas was talking to someone. So I questioned Mrs. Bird about it afterward. She was the first to find the body after all.
Could you tell everyone what you talked about?
Mrs. Bird told me she escorted Freddie to his room.
Yes. And then I went to finish tidying the Starship suite.
Thanks to the Admiral's chat with Mrs. B, I ended up questioning Freddie later. Freddie claimed he saw Q fighting with Lucas by the pool. So, we checked the greenhouse security footage during the time of the incident. Q was there. He couldn't have done it.
That's the moment we realized Freddie was lying through his teeth.
We went to confront Freddie in his room, but he was gone. Instead, we found his notebook, which confirmed our suspicions. Freddie had murdered Lucas.
That's when we all split up into teams and went to search for Freddie.
We found him, lying dead at the bottom of the well in the abandoned house. But his death was no accident.
Dear, how can you be certain it wasn't an accident?
The well's lid was barred by a steel pipe. Someone wanted to make sure Freddie couldn't get out in case he survived the fall. There's also another very important piece of the puzzle. I believe Freddie was being blackmailed and manipulated by someone in this room.
And what did they use to blackmail Freddie with?
The camera footage of Lucas's death, which we thought had been deleted. In the heat of the fight, Freddie accidentally pushed Lucas. Lucas tripped and fell backward, hitting his head on the corner of the pool. And you know the rest. I believe the culprit used this footage to their advantage by transferring it onto a USB key before they deleted it from the system. They probably approached Freddie after that. I think they blackmailed Freddie using the footage, making him their puppet.
It's an interesting theory, Ms. Page. But where's the proof? Where's the USB key?
Carla gave it to me before. I can confirm the USB key is real.
Fine, but the USB key with the security footage didn't appear out of thin air. Where did you find it?
In Jax's suite. I know that doesn't look good for Jax, but I think it was planted there.
On what basis?
The USB key was lying on the floor, partially hidden, as if it was lost. But I don't believe the culprit would be careless enough to lose something so important.
It does sound suspicious, I'll give you that. All right, so if Freddie was being manipulated, what exactly did he have to do for the culprit?
I'm sure that Freddie was made to scout out the lighthouse to find the best vantage point. I found a torn map showing the way to the lighthouse in his room.
He tried to get rid of the map?
He ripped it up and tried to burn it. Thankfully, he didn't do a good job. In any case, when I found the map, I decided to investigate the lighthouse myself. That's where I found the military-grade binoculars.
And you're sure Freddie was in the lighthouse because?
By the binoculars, there was also an empty bottle of Freddie's favorite wine. I'm sure he spent the night there. Most likely, he was involved in some of the other incidents as well.
One thing's still not clear to me. If Freddie was being manipulated by the culprit, why was he murdered?
I believe Freddie found leverage against his blackmailer. And I think that ties directly in with your poisoning, Reuben.
Miss Page, why don't you explain how you reached this conclusion from the beginning?
Of course. After Reuben collapsed during our first dinner together, we started investigating what happened. Dr. Cat ran tests on Reuben that revealed a poison or venom of some kind in his system. At the time, we thought he'd been poisoned by the food or wine. But we ran further tests with Dr. Cat and found no traces of poison in them.
We hit a wall back then, without any further leads to investigate. Until
I had a delayed allergic reaction on my hand.
Which, after analysis, led us to the conclusion that the poison got into your system through your skin.
And how does this relate to Freddie's murder?
It's part of this ring I found on Freddie that makes me suspicious. The same ring that was used to poison you.
A poison ring? Seems like something straight out of my books.
No fiction here, just facts. We found out about the ring thanks to another USB key the culprit left behind in Portia's laptop.
It just looks like an ordinary ring to me.
This button here opens the compartment where the poison was stored.
Can I have a look at it?
Of course. I believe Freddie got his hands on part of the ring and used it as leverage against our culprit, which, in the end, cost Freddie his life.
You said Freddie had a part of it, but what you showed us was a full ring, was it not?
The other part, the sapphire, I found mixed in with a tablecloth in the dryer. I believe the murderer lost the sapphire while poisoning Reuben, and it went through the washing machine with the tablecloth. This led me to believe Reuben was poisoned during dinner.
Isn't it possible Reuben was poisoned earlier?
Unlikely. Some of the poison compounds we identified are very quick to take effect.
I had contact with everyone in the room during the dinner. Anyone could have sprayed it on me.
doesn't that leave the possibility that Freddie could have plotted to poison Reuben and done the deed himself?
First of all, Freddie's dead. Even if he did do it, too many things don't add up. The security footage kept on the USB key, him carrying a part of the ring in his pocket. And I'm sure someone would have noticed Freddie wearing such a flashy ring during dinner.
So your conclusion is that Freddie couldn't have poisoned Reuben?
That's right. All of the heinous acts from that point on were carried out by the person who killed Freddie. Their main objective from the start was to get information on Project Genetica. That's probably why the poison Reuben was sprayed with wasn't lethal. He was kept alive in case the culprit couldn't find any information on the project.
Yet Portia was the one who ended up paying the ultimate price.
Portia's death was a consequence of the culprit trying to get their hands on Genetica. I believe Portia caught the culprit off guard while they were hacking into her laptop. From the evidence I found, I believe it happened something like this.
What are you doing here? You!
I believe that after shooting Portia, the culprit ran away, worried that someone had heard the shots. While investigating the crime scene, I also found a cartridge that seemed to be from a handgun. That's when I decided to check Lucas's gun, which the Admiral was keeping hidden at the time. The number of bullets missing from it was the same number Portia was shot with. It was the murder weapon.
Does that mean the Admiral is the murderer?
Calm down. I didn't kill anyone. Someone stole it from my room, and after committing the crime, put it back in there to frame me.
He couldn't have done it. The Admiral and Q were in the backyard around the time Portia was murdered.
See, the Admiral was with me.
What about Janet? She was in the room with Portia's body when Reuben found them.
Janet does have a motive. She was being blackmailed by Portia to stay away from Reuben.
Oh my God. I'd never kill her. What's wrong with you?
Carla, it doesn't add up. Janet would have had to put the gun back in the Admiral's suite before coming back into the room. Why would she do that?
You might be right. But there's also the culprit's black trench coat, which I found in Janet's suite. The coat's fabric matched the torn piece I found after the Admiral was attacked.
Are you saying it's Janet's?
It didn't fit her, but I'm sure it was planted there to try and throw me off the trail. Either way, before making any further assumptions, there's something else I need to let all of you know. We discovered that the culprit is part of a secretive, very powerful group of people called the Overseers.
Never heard of them.
Consider yourself lucky. Some of the stories I've heard still send shivers down my spine.
I believe most of the stories about the Overseers have a kernel of truth to them. From the information I gathered about them, their roots go back to the 16th century. Their long history is full of instances where they abuse their power from the shadows to influence governments, even kings.
Sounds a bit far-fetched. You really want us to believe this group still exists and remains active to this day?
I encountered them in my younger days. I saw firsthand what they are capable of. Make no mistake, one of them is in this room.
Oh my!
How do you even know the culprit is one of these so-called overseers?
While investigating the trail left by the culprit, we found an emblem with an eye symbol on it. This emblem is heavily associated with the group. I believe their ultimate goal is to steal the formula for the Genetica serum and exploit it for personal gain and power.
Carla, even if all this is true, it doesn't tell us who the culprit is.
Which is why, before I start pointing fingers, there are some other facts I should mention. The culprit had the technology to hack into Reuben's internal systems. We're talking about infiltrating his messaging network and even Haven's security system. Only someone with a lot of resources would have access to such technology.
Carla, now all our cards are on the table. Do you know who the culprit is?
I think I can narrow down the list of suspects to 2 people.
Go on, then.
First of all, it couldn't be Reuben. There's just no motive for him to do any of this. We can cross Q off too, as he couldn't have poisoned Reuben during the dinner. He wasn't there. Also, Q and the Admiral were together when Portia was killed. Neither of them could have murdered her. Dr. Cat can be taken off the list too, even if her motives for taking the data on Jeannie are questionable. Poisoning Reuben would have been a waste of her time, as she had to do the most looking after him, leaving little time to search the mansion for any information on the project. Janet did have a motive to kill Portia, and we did find her at the murder scene. But there's no way she could have tied herself up in the lighthouse. I don't consider her a suspect. And Jax is not exactly in a state to be able to pull off any heists either. All this leaves only 2 people who could possibly be the culprit. It's Margot or Mrs. Bird.
Excuse me? It's obviously the cleaning lady, chérie.
I'm innocent! I could never hurt Reuben!
Enough! Miss Page, get to the point. Who is the culprit?
I'm fairly certain it's Mrs. Bird.
Carla! I am not the murderer! How could you say that?
Georgiana, let's remain calm. I'd like to hear Carla's reasoning first.
Thank you, Reuben. To start with, Mrs. B was the closest to you during the dinner. When serving food, she was standing right beside you. She could have easily poisoned you.
Carla, there is no evidence to back this up.
She also had access to every guest room. I wouldn't be surprised if she's the one who framed Jax.
You've got the wrong person, dear. I'm innocent.
Then where were you after you served dinner to us, the night the Admiral's boat was torched?
I was in the kitchen, cleaning up.
I bet no one saw you down there, though. Right?
You're breaking my heart, dear. Do you really believe I could have killed Portia, too?
When we questioned everyone, Marco told us she left you alone in the club room. It was around the time Portia was murdered. You had a window.
Dear, having an opportunity and actually seizing it are 2 different things. I thought you'd know the difference.
Let's not forget how you almost always end up being close by when Genetica files are stolen. First, we found you locked in Haven after the alarm went off. Maybe you weren't able to get out in time. So you decided to hide the file, put on a little act for us, and then go back to take it later.
That's just absurd.
What about today then? when the last Genetica file was stolen from the security room. Is it so absurd that you were the only one in the security room?
Hang on a sec. I might not fully understand what's going on. But I'm certain what you just said ain't true.
Mind elaborating, Jax?
This afternoon, I saw Margot leaving the security office.
Care to explain yourself, Margot?
Please, Reuben. He must have drunk too much and dreamt it up.
Margot, when I spoke with you today, you were coming up from the basement hall.
So what? That doesn't mean I was in the security office.
Well, if I were in the culprit's shoes and suspected someone had seen me with a stolen file, I'd probably assault them and tie them up too.
Are you insane? I didn't attack her.
But you're obviously hiding something.
Oh, chérie. I believe you're better at keeping secrets than I am. Why hide the fact that Reuben's your father?